Good evening, everybody. This Scrutiny Committee meeting is being conducted on a hybrid basis in accordance with the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, which will operate alongside the Council Standing Orders. The Council Standing Orders and Code of Conduct will apply at all times, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. I remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Please can those attending online switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you are not speaking to ensure there is no unnecessary background noise. And I also remind members to ensure their chat function is switched on and to use that facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak on a particular item, although we usually in this meeting go around in order. Please do not speak until I invite you to do so, and remember to unmute your microphone and switch your camera on. A recorded version of this meeting will be uploaded for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting, and Welsh translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council. Just a reminder to everyone that's joined online, if you can keep your microphones muted until you're invited to speak, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much. So let's start with apologies, please, Neil.
And Councillor Baker Westhead and Councillor Morris, who has IT issues.
Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest today?
Yes,
No?
Chair. Myself,
Thank
yeah, two declarations of interest. My wife is an antisocial reduction officer in Torfaen, and I'm also an employed firefighter for South Wales Fire and Rescue Service.
So these relate to items 5 and 6 on the agenda,
Yes.
is that right?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Screen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure whether it's relevant, but I'm a governor on 2 schools regarding EAS, so I'm not sure if that's relevant or not.
Oh gosh, I guess that would apply to all of us. So
Yes.
yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
No,
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
that's okay then. Fine.
Yes, thank you so much. Brilliant. Okay, so item 3 is the minutes, but we're going to do those at the end. So we're going to move straight on to item number 4, which is the Education Achievement Service Value for Money. And we have a lovely group of people here. So Sarah, our Chief Education Officer, could you do the introductions?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Chair. So this evening we're here to look at the Value for Money report from our colleagues in our Regional School Improvement Service, the EAS. And I'm pleased to introduce to you Director of Resources and Business and Governance, Gareth Willington.
Thank you.
To Ed Price, who's the Assistant Director of the EAS. And to Mark Bella, who plays a special position within our schools and is a principal school improvement partner, supporting our school improvement partners at that higher level. So welcome, Mark. I'll be passing over to Gareth and Ed and Mark to deliver the paper, but you'll recognise why this is particularly important to education services as the EAS, our agreed partners for delivering our school improvement work. And so naturally it matters much to us that they do present value for money. This paper has also been presented to us in our joint executive group and in company boards. So I'm going to pass us to Gareth. Thank you. Thank you, Gareth.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the report, Ed and I will dovetail with the first part of the report, and then Mark will come in a bit later. So the Value for Money report focuses on delivering the regional service and the regional impact against a number of criteria. It's very important at this stage as well to note that it's not broken down to LA detail, and it hasn't been for a number of years. The report was written by an external consultant in Rod Alcott and Betson O'Connor following a tender process. And it's really important at this stage. It's an independent report of the Value for Money of the EES. The report pays particular attention to the extent to which schools are making progress towards becoming schools as learning organisations, which is a Welsh Government priority. And those criteria around the schools and learning organisation is included in Appendix B. So as Sarah just said then, the Education Achievement Services, School Improvement Services for the 5 local authorities of South East Wales is owned by the 5 council and are offered within a robust governance structure which is populated by representative from each of the councils. What's slightly different this year in terms of the report, this is there's a two-phase report. This is the first stage of the report. So we're looking at over a two-year process. And as Sarah's already said, the report is for information has been agreed already through the 3 ES governance groups, which is the company board, the joint executive group, and also the audit and risk assurance committee as well, since the start of the year. As I said earlier, this report is over 2 years, and it's the first time we've done a 2-year study of value for money in this context. So over the 5-year period we presented to you, we've looked at economy, which is spending less, efficiency spending well, effectiveness spending wisely, equity spending fairly, and sustainability is spending for the long term. So those are the 5 areas of value for money that we've been looking at. In 1.8, and it's worth noting that, and this was the recommendation we had from Wales Audit Office many years ago, that value for money should focus on a different area each time we look at value for money, and not as a company as a whole or an organisation as a whole. So you can see there from 2018 to 2022, there are the different value for money studies that have gone on, and each time the independent evaluators said we're providing good value for money over those 5 years. However, there's been significant change in the context of these, which has led the company board then to looking at this 2-year study to replace the annual study previously undertaken. And this is in the context of the changes that are happening on a wide issue in terms of budget pressure, socio-economic climate, post-pandemic recovery, and changes to Welsh Government published outcome measures as well. We're moving back into that scene, so it's very different. But all those, I think budget pressures is the biggest one that's affecting us sort of in terms of moving forward. If I'd hand over to Ed now.
Lovely. So you'll recall previous years we've talked about the data available to us, and we'll have had discussions, and you will have asked many questions as a committee about the challenges that the changes to Welsh Government's accountability frameworks and data has presented. It's presented a challenge to previous external consultants who've written this report as well, because the previous, what was known as standards performance data, was not available. We are seeing some of that come back in from Welsh Government, but only at age 16 with GCSE or equivalent qualifications. We're not seeing, and there is no intention to bring a broader range of that data in. So the reason for the two-phase approach is partially because of that data. It's also because the important element is actually knowing what the impact is in schools. So on the second part of 1.11, you will see a sampling approach has been taken to form a baseline of 40 schools across the region, looking at a broad range of data. Was limited, particularly in the autumn term, by action short of strike, which I'm sure many of you will have heard of, undertaken by head teachers. Up to about 40% of head teachers consistently affected by that, where they exercise their right not to have school improvement work undertaken within that school during that period. Therefore, our eyes-on, hands-on schools was limited during that period, as it was for the consultants. So the work has taken as phase one for a short period after, during the spring, where they're forming a baseline, which is where the phase two will come in a year's time to look at the impact made on that baseline along the range of areas discussed in the remainder. I won't cover all of them, but on 112, those progresses, looking at that measures of progress, where they are determined at school and cluster level rather than being agreed national. Welsh Government, as you used to publish value-added measures all over across ranges from Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 3, Key Stage 3 to Key Stage 4, etc. That is definitely not returning. Therefore, it is looking at what one could argue is ultimately more important, what's going on in the classroom and upwards for leadership. So that research determines that schools as learning organisations, the OECD, I can never remember the full name of the acronym, but the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, I got it, is a strategy, for want of a better word, promoted by them to look at how schools self-improve, work together, which our approaches have facilitated and aim to facilitate that sharing over the years. So phase two will look at that. For a business plan, it's about monitoring our objectives, reporting on those through, as Sarah mentioned, JEG, the Joint Executive Group, where you are all the 5 councils well represented as the owners of the company. So this report has been through those processes already, where the consultants have presented them. There is, within work to do across stakeholders, across schools, of understanding the links that there are between school improvement down the line, as I would describe it, school improvement and outcomes for learners, which is our paramount objective. So our priority under 1.16 is about supporting school self-evaluation processes so that they're accurate. And as a colleague of mine nicely puts it, we draw alongside colleagues in school to be doing that work with them rather than doing it to them, which, for a number of years, perhaps we did. When I say we, school improvement in general, across many countries. So our support is about strengthening capacity, and the report does recognise that strengthening the capacity of schools to support other schools is challenging to measure, because you've got at both ends of it improvements potentially, that the delivering, for want of a better word, school gets something out of the process as much as the school receiving the support. Garen's mentioned the socioeconomic elements. We recognise that there is still variation out there within our schools, particularly post-pandemic as well, and that at times perhaps some leaders don't recognise that variation that is there, or need that additional support to address those elements within their schools. Too many school development plans noted, this is in the 40 on the baseline, have priorities that don't necessarily focus directly onto teaching and learning and the direct impact on learners, and they may be focused on more structural elements within school instead. It's minimising variation is key. You will see there in that penultimate bullet point on 1.16. The paramount element for us as well is clusters working together, and there have been significant amounts of support working alongside clusters, because it is only when our learners are age 16 and they leave that we know, well, you could argue that we may only know 10 years later when they're 25 whether we've been successful as an education system. But that's the goal of our primary schools now, rather than concentrating at outcomes at aged 11, having 95% level 4s or level 5s going, are they prepared for the next stage of education? That's the key. The 1.17, I won't go through, it just structures the report, which is there in full as the appendix for you. We haven't adapted, I need to say, many of the paragraphs in here because they are written from the report writers, and I will hand back to Geraint on the financial context on 1.19.
Thanks, Ed. So I'll just go through the table now when going through the wording. So you can see the LA funding for 2016 was reduced from 3.376 million down to 2.960 million. For 3-4 then, which was in the paper, but there was a 10% cut then in the core local authority funding, and a further 10% cut going into this year. So obviously that doesn't account then for the high inflation we've experienced over the last couple of years, the pay awards, etc. So it's like a little dummy whammy there that we're experiencing. So in terms of value for money, it's becoming even more important as we move forward in terms of spending in the right areas. You can see that we've moved away from trading income. That's an approach we've taken from the early days of when the ES was set up, and that's gradually reduced over the years to we used to ask schools to pay a contribution to the ES through training, etc. We moved away from that to keep the money into schools as a way forward. So you can see the total core funding as it currently stands is reduced by £1 million in that time. Yeah, and that will further increase that over the next 2 years with the other cuts. The grants then you can see have been sustainable for a number of years around the 58 to 60 million mark. That reduced slightly last year with the PDG going to local authorities to distribute, and now we're into a whole new remit now moving forward because the grants now sit with the local authorities. That's the conversations that are ongoing. You can see the delegation to school. We've come from a relatively low position in 2012, where the average was around about 70% and 60%. In some local authorities were up to 96% in 2003-4. So the onus was to get money into schools, and that's been the direction of travel. And you can see that in the residual income then has decreased over these years and to fund the company as we've moved forward.
Yep. So conclusions, and I'll be very brief because I touched on most of these in my first part. I'll give you more time for questions. The conclusions recognise the policy and financial context of the moment, with ongoing changes announced at a national level to review, and that review has been published at national level, but there is phase 2 ongoing. So that work, this was started before the announcements of this work. Our business plan continues this year. We continue to work with the grants, with local authorities, with the right distribution of the grants, to sustain elements through conversations there. From 1.28, it is continuing to support our schools as learning organisations in their day-to-day work. Rather than go through the remaining points, I will leave you for more time for questions, I suggest, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Dreyer, would you like to go first?
Yeah, can I just little clarification? It's typo. I'm sure it's a typo. Page 17 on the summary. This report details the findings from a value for money review that was undertaken to. Is there are there missing words there? An independent report, value for money.
Yeah, I think there's some words.
Is there? Are there
Was to undertake.
to undertake? Yeah. Sorry. That's picky.
It's been through lots of theirs, lies of it.
Yes, head.
Can I ask about a baseline, setting a baseline, and how far is setting a baseline a key factor in measuring school improvement?
If I start, probably on Mark. The work of setting a baseline, I think we have to be careful of the culture from which we came in the last decade, where ultimately the baseline, the way that schools were judged was through national categorization, which was an industry on an annual basis to award schools from 1 green to red 4, which were then published and became league takers in effect. That is not necessarily the culture that we want to encourage, but we do need to know internally, have systems which are more subtle and nuanced than that, to work with heads, that there is understanding, that there is collective agreement. Yes, there may be disagreement in getting that judgment, but there is understanding of why those people reached and understood within our schools. So we'll continue to work with schools on that, rather than returning to some of the older systems which weren't appropriate.
So why? I think you've answered this. Why have so few schools actually set a baseline?
We're not asking schools to set a baseline. We're forming a baseline for ourselves, for our purposes, collectively across the system, but that we do know numbers of schools that require X amount of support, or we would know the schools that require more intensive or targeted support. We know the schools that require the lowest levels of support, but they're not the categorization, they're about support that schools require. And we would expect those categories to change over time, which would demonstrate impact.
Answer your question, Councillor.
Yes, I think. So, does the EAS have any role in setting a baseline or helping schools to find what their baseline is?
We're talking at school level now rather than pupil level, and what we're talking about here with the baseline is usually using the independent consultants with the 40 schools they've selected randomly that we don't even know where they are, to sample across the region where we are and then measure the progress that those schools make over time. Okay, thank you.
Do you want to, I know you've got a couple of other questions. Do you want to go through those?
Yeah.
Can
I ask about school development plan? Do clearly defined and appropriate priorities set in the school's school development plan impact the school's ability to self-improve?
So the school development plan and the accuracy of it. The school development plan ultimately has to reflect an accurate self-evaluation with the school. We know, however, that there is no legal requirement to publish a self-evaluation document anymore, because Welsh Government removed that in the past. However, the processes, and Mark may have to give in some detail how we support schools on that, ensuring the processes are accurate that leaders use to, for example, being perhaps putting some quantitative measures on the percentage of excellent teaching, the quality of good teaching, and qualitative measures to reflect where that needs to change. If that process isn't accurate, as one example, then how can you necessarily create an accurate, meaningful school development plan? The simplistic way I often use it on governor trainings is to say, if boys writing is your issue, but you're focusing on your training and development on maths, then there's a clear mismatch between the two, and you are not going to have success with your school development plan because it's aimed at the wrong area. Is the trite example that I give.
I think the idea of what we try and achieve is that every school in the region has a universal level of support where a serving head teacher or a school leader works alongside head teachers of designated schools to help identify and use the first-hand evidence to help prioritise what those needs are at a local context. What our model allows us to do, though, is to allow us, once we have the baseline, and Ed and Kieran have talked about the 40 schools across the region that we don't necessarily know the names of, but when we work at it from a Newport perspective, I know, working alongside the Chief Education Officer and the Deputy Chief Education Officer, that we work collaboratively to ensure that the priorities that Newport sets, we're able then to work with the schools to give the local authority a good understanding then of which schools are performing particularly well, which schools might need additional support, and then which schools then might then be worthwhile to share good practice. And we work on a termly basis to ensure that the local authority then has that very bespoke and precise intelligence to kind of support the schools as best they can.
Yeah. So, Chair, on page 31, it says too many school development plans have priorities which do not focus on the outcomes of teaching and learning. So, the EAS has an impact on school development plans, you said?
So obviously the school development plan is the responsibility of the head teacher and governing bodies. The regional consortia as the EAS in that sense will provide professional learning, and our work fundamentally is to help schools understand and evaluate its own practice through looking at first-hand evidence and guide schools in terms of how they might want to consider strength and performance. Ultimately, it is the responsibility of schools and ultimately governing bodies then to set that. And I know we've done a piece of work at the summer term. One of you mentioned about the schools, obviously action short of strike. So to react to that, we worked with the local authority officers to modify our work so that we focus specifically on secondary schools. And we did do a piece of work around self-evaluation and improvement planning. And actually at a local authority level, Newport, we found that variability wasn't as clear as maybe the report that has come out across the region has shown.
And to add one small point, it is worthwhile remembering this is a reflection of the 40 schools that were sampled rather than the whole or Newport specifically.
Yeah.
It's the truth that just two practical points for that. There's two checks and balances that we do, which might be helpful as headlines. Number one, we attend school development planning sessions, so the head teacher and the chair and governor are present to take us through their school improvement priorities. We ask the school to explain how they got to those priorities through their self-evaluation system. And the second aspect is that we quality assure the school's self-evaluation processes so that we're reassured that they are both correct in terms of the methodology, is appropriate, and it aligns then to the school improvement plan. We've also had reassurance feedback from Esther that in Newport, the self-evaluation processes of schools are strong.
And a further layer this year, I know myself, the Deputy Chief Education Officer, we met with, as we were doing the professional discussions, we actually brought each school improvement partner for those schools in, expecting them to analyse and evaluate the quality of the school development plan, and we were probing their understanding so that they had a full understanding of that, so that when we met with, I know initially we began with secondary schools, when we met with individual schools to talk about their priorities, that was a very bespoke experience rather than standardised questions, so that we knew that the school improvement partner was adding value as well.
It's good to hear, Chair, that it is taking place, and as is pointed out, the robustness of the SDPs is important.
Instead, you've got a couple more questions.
Sorry. Can I ask about finance and the context of the challenges that the EES has, and you mentioned that in this context, the loss of funding in real terms, I think 30% over 7 years, something along those lines. And I know that Welsh Government takes some criticism, and so do local authorities. But if we remember, in the context of everything, that Westminster Government as well hasn't funded Welsh Government sufficiently, and so the funding that comes from Welsh Government and local authority, consequently, and I think that some in the context, in the overall context of this funding, the impact of what Westminster Government, the austerity. So can I ask a question? Would you agree that when things improve financially, the children in our schools should have priority in terms of making up for what has what they've lost out on in the last few years?
Start. I'll have to try and start on that one. I think it's been a challenge from day one in terms of the regional approach, because year on year, in the beginning, there was lots of efficiencies coming into the system, and then perhaps we talk about the cuts in the last 2 years, was a 20% cut. But throughout that process, our main goal was to protect schools.
And we can, sorry to interrupt, we can see that, can't we, from the...
Yeah, you can see it from the data. We have, we've worked with the local authorities, we've innovated many a times over the years. We've restructured many a times to work with what we've got and make it happen at school level. And I think we've demonstrated through the value for money reports we've achieved that. It is getting harder, but everything is getting harder, even at local authority level. Yeah, but it has been the goal to make sure the money is getting to the schools. And I said, delegations increased from 70% in 2012 to 96% in the year we're talking.
So is the value for money reports, this 2-year cycle now, being introduced to save money?
It's been part of the process for the last couple of years. So every year we've managed to set a balance, even though that we've got quite a difficult year ahead. We've managed to set a balanced budget for the year ahead. Yeah, and we're looking to retain for the coming year. We're still working with the local authorities around the grants, because that hasn't been. We've had firm commitment from the local authorities and the chief exec to keep the same support to schools moving forward, the same investment in schools moving forward. We're not quite there in ticking it off yet, but it's certainly a commitment that we'll protect schools for the coming year and they'll receive the same service for the coming year as well.
Anything else you'd like to ask?
One last one.
Hi, Fiona.
Well, sorry, a tiny one. Looking to the future, is the EAS looking to introduce technology to help in schools and improve schools? Sorry, yeah, carry on.
Just to start that question, obviously the infrastructure within schools remains the local authority of the local authority, SRS for schools who apply that, so we do not directly support technology directly. We do, however, support the use of technology in schools through the IT team in terms of advisors in that area who would continue to support schools and continue to work closely with SRS and LA colleagues on the infrastructure side. That's our component part of the role. In terms of technology internally, one of our key drivers in our area in particular has been to use technology to make sure we're as efficient as we possibly can be, particularly in the management of the partner schools that we work with. We could not do what we do without the technology that we create internally to facilitate and all of the wheels of all of that.
Where do you see artificial intelligence coming in?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We had a conversation meeting on that as well. Currently, with the use of artificial intelligence, when you are looking at the linguistic elements and the writing and the reports and the pulling of linguistic information, we're analysing that in terms of efficiencies of report writing, etc. We know that in schools, and this is where on the IT support side, we know that there are many fears out there about the use of artificial intelligence initially, and perhaps there are many skills to learn as well, in that the questions that you pose for artificial intelligence can be the most important part, rather than artificial intelligence itself, and framing the questions that you ask of systems, the way in which you design them, is key. It's just a little snippet of much of the training that we're developing and delivering for schools and teachers in particular.
And I think one of the challenges that we've certainly seen, that the pressures placed on teachers. I'm a serving head teacher in a secondary school in Cardiff, so I understand the pressures that teachers are under in that sense, is that the work of the regions, that our curriculum partner for digital skills has provided a lot of professional learning for all of the staff that work in EAS to enable us, and the three of us did meet a couple of weeks ago to explore how we might utilise artificial intelligence to aid the work that we do, but not replace the work, if that makes sense. Similarly, by allowing those professional partners to invest that time to upskill and do the professional learning themselves, means they can disseminate that amongst ICT teachers and all the various other subject specialists to enable them to have the kind of legwork available for them to support them as they grapple through this challenge that we're finding increasingly, particularly in secondary schools, around non-examination assessment, around coursework and all the other various bits and pieces that children are very innovative and finding ways to utilize these tools in order to produce their work. It isn't that long ago, 10, 15 years ago, where people at university were able to purchase essays and dissertations and whatever, and really it's now getting at a level where artificial intelligence is so advanced that children are able to access it at a fingertip. So we need to be ahead of the game. So our curriculum partner for digital skills is providing really useful support across the region, but also to upskill the talents of the staff that work within the region as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Yes, hello there. So just looking at the financial side of it now, with the delegation rate, obviously it's been improved, which is credit to yourself. Year 22-23, we got the 96%. Do you think going forward there we can improve on that, or do you think there might be a reverse, or you might see a reduction backwards on that trend?
It's a hard one because, as I said, mentioned earlier, it's not a regional grant now. They're all gone into the local authority grants. That mix be mixed with the local authority education grants. So I'm working with the finance officer from Newport as with the other, trying to unpick what Welsh Government have given us for the coming year, or given the local authorities compared to what was regional. So we're trying to unpick at the moment and see where, if there are gains, there are losses. Is moving forward.
What I would say is our absolute priority to keep the money in schools.
Yes. I mean, it's good that we've seen it on last year's, I wish you were there as well. And, it is credit to yourselves. It'd be nice to keep it there or improve on it. And I know the constraints now are against yourselves, but it's just you're at the forefront there, and it's like you're the ones we've got to ask the questions of. And if you can say we're hoping to maintain it or we're hoping to improve it, that gives us encouragement. So that's my point.
I think there's always that balance, I think, moving forward.
I think one thing that's really excellent as well is you probably will see a higher delegation rate to schools in the whole of Wales.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to hear.
And I can testify that as someone who works in the region. This is by far, I've said many a times, that if there was an opportunity for our school in Cardiff to transfer into this region, to access some of the funding that is available directly to schools, to be innovative with the curriculum, that doesn't happen in any of the other regional consortia to the level that it happens in the EAS.
That's good to hear. That's really good to hear. Yes.
I just think when you say this, when you read the report with there's pay awards and such like that, obviously if the money's not coming in and the pay is increasing, the squeeze is there, so it's just going to affect your percentages.
It is, and I think that's where there's always a limit how much you can actually get to delegation. Of course, we want to keep it at 96%, but you've got to trim around the edges. You've got to find more efficient ways of working.
And not redundancies.
And not redundant. It is that balance.
The high places needs to be there.
Yeah. So it's just finding a way forward. And like I said, we've managed to set a balanced budget again for next year. We're looking to retain the delegation rates as they are. Yeah. So hopefully that will continue.
And it is on the back, isn't it? Of course, that obviously the vast majority of money that goes into schools through the individual school budget comes from local authority. And in fact, Newport as a local authority seeks to delegate as much as well. So it's consistent with the local authority approach to individual school budgets that the region that Newport is situated within also seeks to do the same by making sure that as much money as possible goes into individual school budgets so that the money can be spent on the children that are the primary beneficiaries of the education that we're trying to offer.
I think just to end on this one, because we're all school governors and we sit on school panel and such, and we hear stories of cost of living and schools are struggling with finances and there's been cuts and such like that. It's quite it's nice to sit on this side to see that it's all positive, but when you with some head teachers and teachers, they sort of got a mixed storyline. So I just think, really speaking, they need to be applauded as well. And if you can embrace their issues and help and support them in whichever way you can, I think they could do that help as well.
I think it's one possible point, Jed, to put things into context with the 5.5 million of residual income. If sort of distributed to the local authorities each, it would probably be the equivalent of a small primary school budget.
That's across village.
But it's not in the grand scheme of things huge proportions here.
Sorry, Chair, I've missed something out. Just after that 5 minute what I picked up. Because we use schools to deliver services for us as well. There's probably £1 million in that 5 million that's delegated to schools from the residual income as well. Yeah. So because it comes to us, we use schools for the partner model, through the partnership model. So that's delegation from our budget into schools. And that's how we've been able to achieve a lot of the efficiency savings over the years.
Sorry, I won't answer your questions until we've been fighting.
From a Newport perspective, because there's a lot of good practice in Newport, and many of the schools are sharing that practice across the region, and that is generating income, whether it's soft income through this money, is generating income from that school to support those additional cost pressures, whether it's energy efficiency and various bits and pieces that are coming through, and the state's management, all those things, with an aging school estate across Wales as well, all those things are creating pressures. So this income that Garen's talking about is supporting that as well.
That's welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Councillor Davis.
Hi, sorry about that. My camera went a bit wild. I'd like to say thank you for you all for putting this report together. It's obviously a very comprehensive report. I've understood a lot more by listening to you and the answers you've given to my colleagues. Only one small thing I wanted to know. You say you've got no input on the schools that are chosen, but who came about the idea of just using 40 schools out of the whole authorities? Was that just chosen at random, or was there a specific reason behind it?
No, I think we left it. Sorry, Chair, if you don't mind answering.
Absolutely.
So we left it to the independent evaluator. They had time considerations they had to factor in as well. So they factor around what they could generally put into the project, to get out of it. And they picked up they picked the 40 as the sensible way forward.
The one thing I would add is that we did have discussions that 30 would be a meaningful lowest to make it a meaningful sample. So given that there are 230 across the region, so 30, we're above that minimum sample size.
And will those schools, those 40 samples, will they be used permanently, or will it be changed around, so different schools each year?
We need to keep it stable between phase 1 and 2 to measure the progress within those schools. Bear in mind, we don't know who these schools are. The schools don't all know, they've been contacted to contribute, but they don't. The whole list is not open to every school in it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
It is research based, effectively, so restricted.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Whitehead. Have you got any questions you'd like to ask?
Thank you, Chair. Questions, maybe observations, and please feel free to stop me at any time you think I'm going on a tangent or off tangent. Something that Councillor Druitt said there. Yeah, I'm happy to be stopped. But something that Councillor Druitt touched on first, there's a couple of points, was I always think about education funding comparisons. You mentioned Westminster, blah, blah, blah. But obviously, we're aware of the PISA findings where Wales is full academic year behind the other home unions, yeah? Are we saying that is down to the financial constraints put on us? That's my one point. So is it a financial issue that Wales struggles so much across the board education wise, and we are this full academic year behind? The other one was I wanted to touch was A1. I'm not sure. Even the inventor has said he's terrified of his own invention, so that would be a biggie. and self-evaluation.
AI.
Yeah,
Do you mean AI?
A1, AI, yeah. A1, it's an Audi car or a BMW. But yeah, AI, like I say, that's for the future, surely, and that would have to be hugely policed in any education system, because that can be taken massively advantage of. And for the inventor of it to be frightened by it says a lot. And the self-evaluation thing, for me, whenever I think of self-evaluation, you might as well ask me how good I was at rugby, and I'm going to tell you I was brilliant. So just a couple of little points there. If you've got any kind of observations yourself on mine, I think they're relevant. The finance thing always bugs me, because that is the fact that the PISA report is factual. So are we going to blame our falling education standards on finances?
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead.
I think we'd have to go back to international research on literacy. I think that it's a complex issue. I don't think we could make comments here this evening. It links back to the culture of oracy and literacy within families. Links back to poverty. It's just too broad to comment on. But what I can reassure you of is that literacy and numeracy are both priorities within the EAS business plan, and we've got excellent network schools set up within our EAS system to support the sharing of best practice. We've got a real sharp focus on early years to make sure that we're looking at oracy and development of early markings with children to start their very, very infancy of their writing skills at an early age. We've got great family support within our Newport City Council, helping our most challenged families. So it is a really joined up approach, and I'm really proud of that within the city. But it's far too big an area to comment on in this particular meeting.
And I'd imagine we haven't seen the impact of the pandemic yet, because the pandemic babies have just hit the second.
Can I just make one point on what Sarah said there? Because Sarah, I think that's a valid point you've made, in fairness. I often watch my kids with my grandchildren, and their reading is miles ahead of where they really should be. And I have thought to myself, how many people are still doing this at home? I'm not saying my kids push their children, because they certainly don't, but they're very involved with the reading. And I'm sometimes shocked. Like, we got a 6-year-old, and I'm like, really? She's reading like a 15-year-old. How much of that happens in the homes around us, and I'm not getting judgy, don't get me wrong, but will the lack of that actually have an impact? Because I think it's important. It's an important thing to think about.
Yeah. I agree with you, Councillor Whitehead, but I don't think this is what the value for money report is.
No, I think I was going on the standards, the education standards, and the financial side of it. Where does that impact the education standards, if that makes sense? I think that was where I went on, but I told you I would go off on a tangent. I warned you, Em.
So I guess what Councillor Whitehead is asking is, the money that you spent. Yeah.
Before Mark comes in, I would just say that there are so many, and Sarah said, there are so many other factors that to answer that question is impossible, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's acknowledged the latest round of PISA results were disappointing for Wales. Pre-pandemic, the trajectory of performance was improving, but of course the transformation of a new curriculum, of which obviously regional consortia and the EAS have been really transformative in helping schools to develop their new curriculums, we anticipate is going to help children have stronger reader development, have core skills in literacy, numeracy, and those enhanced skills in digital skills. We anticipate is going to see some improvements in coming years.
If I could add on to make a comment on Councillor Whitehead, your third point on self-valuation. If it is done in isolation, it is meaningless, I think was the point you made. I think that's very supportive of the viewpoint. Supportive self-evaluation with someone alongside you being very important, because it heightens everything for all parties to make it a much more meaningful and beneficial exercise, and ultimately more accurate.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Green, did you have any questions?
Sorry, I couldn't find my microphone. I got it now. Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, what I'm interested in is, I mean, I've worked in education over 30 years, and I know that education is heavily regulated. It always has been, and obviously from the the teaching aspect of it, sometimes that can be quite onerous on staff, So I'm interested really in exploring how schools view the EAS. Do they see it really in terms of a judgmental approach or developmental approach? Or do you try to balance both approaches together? It's a tension there. I know it's a tension there. It has to be managed in some way. In the same way as efficiency and effectiveness. There's a tension there between being efficient and being effective, and that has to be managed. So I was interested in looking at the, from the school point of view, do they see the EAS as being a sort of critical partner, critical friend, or do they see the EAS primarily, I suppose they see it often in the same way as a judgmental, thing. So do you have a view from the school, point of view? That's
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We do annual surveys where we get feedback from schools. We have regular meetings with the various head teacher groups in each local authority, our own head teacher strategy group, where we are generally the feedback that we get is that we are a responsive organisation that listens to head teachers and works with them collegiately to put everything together and everything in place. None of what we offer is imposed. One of the things that I would add, compared with perhaps the system where we did have national categorisation, where I had a title once which was the one wonderfully entitled the Challenge Advisor, which is an interesting title in terms of how weighted it is just in the name. We have moved on incredibly since that, where and it's the same for governors and with governor training. It's the balance between support and challenge that is critical, but the word challenge and what that means is challenge as a critical friend, isn't it? And it's similar in the relationship that we feel we have with the vast majority of schools, where we can give sometimes the difficult messages, as does the LA in partnership very much with us as well. But generally, it's done in a very, very supportive way, perhaps compared with a decade ago.
Thank you so much. Okay, so Screen, did you have any other questions?
No, thank you, Chair. I know it's a difficult one. It wasn't a very focused question, I admit. But I was interested in seeing, what the view is from the classroom, from the practitioners involved. I think you basically, I mean, the main thing is you mentioned in the report that the budget pressures are the biggest challenge, facing schools. We all know that, and it's a question of trying to do more with less. And I know that's difficult, and I know that is difficult. Having been at the sharp end of it, I appreciate that. No, thank you. I mean, just on the side, on AI, I think it was Stephen Hawkins who said, when asked about AI, he said, "Be afraid, be very afraid." So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hussain, would you like to ask anything?
Thank you, Chair. My question is actually similar to Councillor Screen. Sorry, it was Councillor Screen. But what I wanted to know, you've mentioned that you don't know the schools, the 40 sample schools. Is there a reason for that?
So you don't cheat?
Well, this is not something we would ever do, but the perception could be that if we know the 40 schools, that maybe those randomly selected 40 schools, maybe the 40 schools that are having the greatest degree of support the next year. We would never do that, but certainly public perception could be that we might do that.
Mm-hmm. And
I would
also,
imagine that's the
Okay, and the other thing I wanted to ask was, again, it was about feedback. I mean, you're during the phase 1, with any feedback from the schools, have you identified any like areas of concern where you can make any changes or make any improvements?
The main areas are in 1.16 and the list of bullet points that are there. We have used those as reference points to be identifying more generally in our support that we are very keenly focused on those areas. For example, too many school development plans are priorities which do not focus on outcomes of teaching and learning. The third from the bottom, that would be a key priority for principal school improvement partners in training that we do and development work we do to be ensuring we're focused on that within the work that we're doing in schools. So lots emerging from that at the early stages.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Councillor Pym?
Thank you, Chair. There doesn't seem to be a hand raising icon on my screen at the moment. Sorry.
Go round to Sol anyway. So
yeah, no worries. There are 2 points to be made. Apologies if I missed this in the report, but were the staff and teachers at the schools allowed to offer feedback anonymously during your was there an option for that?
We haven't had direct feedback on that, but we don't even know what the schools are, so we wouldn't know. They're independent consultants, so we're blind to that research anyway. So the outcomes of it are anonymous in effect.
I think Councillor Pym is talking about your stakeholder.
Oh, right, sorry. Stakeholder feeders, yes, there is an option to be anonymous. There's an option to give names as well. It's entirely optional. Sorry, I thought you meant the report process. Yes.
Yes, and then in terms of kind of how EAS can help, you know, in the future, how they can expand their role. Many schools have got facilities that could be used on the weekends or after school hours, such as 4G pitches, gym facilities. Do you give any advice on how schools can maximise their wealth generation, how they can raise funds through their resources and facilities in terms of business expansion? Or is this something that you don't really get involved with? And if not, is it something that you could consider? Because there's a number of schools within the region at the moment that have got facilities that could be used outside of school hours.
Sorry, we're just covering what's in the report, which is the value for money report, so the stuff that's in the report at the moment. So I'm not sure that everyone, Sarah would agree, can't comment on that specifically.
But it's that's a local authority support.
Yes, yes, it would be local authority support as opposed to EAS support.
Okay. Yeah, the final thing I wanted to say is that I think the last time that we met, I hadn't really experienced much of EAS's role, but being a governor at 2 schools over the past year, I've been involved in the selection process for a new head teacher, and I thought that EAS were fantastic. They were really helpful throughout, and I really saw firsthand what role and service that they do offer. So I see you in a completely different way as in compared to when we last met. So thank you for your efforts during that process.
Thank you. That's lovely, positive finish. Any Councillor Jones, did you have another question?
Yeah, it's a good one, really.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. We talk about budgets and cuts and maintaining services at that level. There's some changes coming about, which probably within the next 12 months. If there was a windfall of extra capital for yourselves, what area do you think we could throw the money at straight away to see improvements?
Councillor Jones, the money would be decided by the local authority who are going to pass it over.
If it came down the line, it come to the councils, like over the 5 councils, there was more finance. Is there a particular area that the council then identify, or would there be some sort of area that you've reviewed and think we need that money for that particular area?
I'm not sure if Sarah could answer that from a council perspective in this meeting. Obviously she can't. Yeah.
I don't want to do more money, but just.
I think hypothetically, our principle has always been about supporting schools. So if that meant that we were able to generate more opportunities to enable schools to work with other schools to improve their practice, so that we're systematically sharing the best practice across the region to enhance the opportunities for children, that is our fundamental priority. So in the unlikely event that that something of that nature did happen, then ultimately that would always be our approach to try and support schools to be more effective, to give children better life chances.
And just briefly to add to it, sorry, Chair, time, I think, within schools in terms of, for example, the professional learning lead role that we've had for a number of years, to have time for someone to look after that training element away from the classroom for elements of time is critical to run that within schools.
It's interesting what you said about the schools helping each other, because in my work there, we cross over the teachers and support each other to try and help the newer school or your new staff and such. So there is, I think, a high demand, whether it's financial cost or whether it's time cost, a constraint there where your hands are tied with how much they can help each other. And I think that's valuable, where each school have got a good team in place and they can share that experience, which will help everybody across Newport.
I'm very conscious of time because we've got another 2 reports to get through and we all want to get. But just as a comment we'd like to add.
Can I just thank you for this really positive value for money report and the excellent working partnership with yourself and Newport City Council to produce such excellent schools in Newport. Thank you.
And thank you for your time this evening as well. So we're going to do the recommendations. Do we just need Sarah?
Oh, yeah, you just keep going.
Yes. Yeah, so thank you very much. Have a lovely evening. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
Just general comments regarding this particular school partners if we're all going to analyse the school development plans, but I'm expecting individual schools to talk about their priorities. The bespoke city is important, and for CAS, they're trying to keep monies in schools and maintaining this, which is encouraging to hear. Apart from those comments, was there any comments or recommendations the committee would like to make for this report?
We did talk together earlier regarding the report, and maybe it could be a little less. What's the phrase we're looking for? Councillor Jewett?
Cut and paste.
A little less drawn out, and we noticed a few cut and paste things in there. So maybe the report next year when it comes could be of a greater clarity.
I think you said a concise one,
Yes.
Understandable, concise, but more understandable, because there's
Yes.
a lot of words there where it's not necessarily in the report.
Yes, and I think a few of us felt that when we were reading it, have we just read this 2 minutes ago? So that would be great. Thank you.
Very layered it was, yeah.
Councillor Pym, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, sorry, I've just turned my mic and camera.
No, that was
Why
me.
your camera was up?
Sorry, Emma, that was myself. I was just saying it just seemed to be a very layered document, you know. Like you said, we were repeated reading, you know. Sometimes I just read that. So it was very layered. That's all. It's comprehensive, obviously.
If we could keep, just a reminder, keep the cameras and microphones off unless we are asking a question or big calls upon, that would be really helpful. Thank you. I said we thank you very much, Sarah, for your time this evening. It's the pen, could you pop your mic? Perfect, thank you. Thank you very much. Change it.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. So we are now moving on to agenda item 5, which is the Safer Newport Strategic Needs Assessment 2024 to 2029. The committee will remember that we had the draft version of this on the 8th of November last year, and we are asked to consider the report and decide then if we want to make any recommendations in relation to the report. So am I handing over to you?
I'm going to kick off, Jane.
Thanks very much. So kick off, is that
potentially. I'll start and I'll have a go. So just introduce, I think you know everybody, but I'll just introduce everybody. First of all, so got Janice Dent, who's Policy and Partnership Manager,
Helen Gordon, who's the Senior Policy and Partnership Officer, and then Sam Slater's Head of Strategy, the Officer of Police and Crime Commission for Gwent. I think primarily will be the next agenda item.
Okay.
When we look at serious violence,
Yes.
strategic needs assessment particularly, and then we look at the serious violence duty steps. So we can just take the strategic needs assessment community safety first of all. So firstly, an apology, because I think something's happened to some of the formatting as it's gone from a Word document to a PDF, right? So I think if you've got some questions around that, we'll try to explain what the bits look like and be like, and see if we can reissue some of that to the committee beyond this, because I noticed some of the format is pushed on and some of the graphs are overlaid. So yeah, as Chair said, we've previously been here with the draft, and I'll try not to say this in an overly complicated way, but just to remind everybody where we are with this. So undertaking the strategic needs assessment for community safety, and then developing a community safety plan is a statutory responsibility, as set out in the Crime Disorder Act. Prior to moving into a Gwent Public Service Board, this was something that we held within our wellbeing assessment for Newport, and then within our wellbeing plan, and Safe for Newport as a strand of that work. So that would have been reported through this committee as part of that work. Now we're going to a Gwent Public Service Board. It's appropriate for us to pull that out and look again at a specific strategic needs assessment for the Newport area, which will then flow on later this year into a community safety strategic plan. It's a partnership piece of work. It's not our piece of work. I'm here in my role as joint chair of the Community Safety Partnership for Newport. My co-chair is Chief Superintendent Carl Williams, who's unfortunately unable to attend this meeting, but was chair for the previous meeting.
Yeah.
But it's a partnership responsibility. There are a number of statutory partners within that: local authority, Gwent Police, South Wales Fire and Rescue, and Iron Health Board, and then a range of other partners of support that work primarily around the RSL, Newport Live, third sector organisations, etc. We work very closely with probation services, etc. So we work very closely around that. So the purpose of the report today, which Janice and Helen will talk more about, is I would say we've done the draft. This is not the draft, but this will always still be the draft, because this is an iterative process. So we will, within this piece of work, you will see, and Janice and Helen will reference it. There are data gaps that have been identified as a part of this work, and analytical gaps, because it isn't just about the data; it's about how you analyse that data and come up with pose a series of questions that tell you more about the situation and actually enable you to better plan the interventions you can put in place. So within the report, we're quite clear about that. There are data gaps. We need to further this. There are analytical gaps. We need to do further work on this. So it'll never be complete. I think that'd be the point of it saying. I don't think we will have data on a regular basis, nor on an annual basis, just on a regular basis that we find out more things. And we formulate the strands of work we're going to put in place for the plan that we come up with. And part of that work in itself will drive that analytic work. That's far more than the couple of words that Janice anticipated for me. But I'll hand over to Janice, and Janice will talk a bit more about the assessment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. So yeah, the actual strategic needs assessment is on pages 59 to 127 of your pack. Hopefully you'll see how much has developed since we brought it in November. A lot of that was based on the feedback that committee members gave us at that time. So, massive kind of thank you for those tips in relation to how we engage with wider communities, how we engage with elected members a bit more. So that was really helpful, and you can see how that's developed since then. So what it does do, and that's reset, it's never going to be a finished article because things change all the time, but it does give us an evaluation of the current picture in reports in relation to community safety. You will see there's some qualitative data, quantitative data from agencies including Police, the OPCC and South Wales Fire and Rescue as an example. And then we've also got some qualitative insights from those residents, partners, children and people that we spoke to as part of the consultation period. So trying to get, going back to Reese's point about the analysis, it's not just about the numbers. It's also about what is that telling us, and there are some things that you would have identified in there, such as e-bikes and scooters as an example, that we haven't necessarily got the data for yet, but we have got that qualitative insight that it is an issue within Newport and something that we need to look at in more detail. So through the analysis that we've got to date, we've kind of identified as a partnership 3 priority areas, which are serious violence and organised crime, and that will link to the next item that we're going to talk about, the antisocial behaviour as well around different areas within Newport, and kind of, you know, some of the precursors of antisocial behaviour into more serious crime, and about that prevention and early intervention activity. And also we've identified within Newport, we've got some of our groups that are a bit more vulnerable to community safety risks than others. So, you know, people like our people who are sleeping rough, our kind of violence against women and girls, and that kind of action, are people that use substances. So not necessarily a community safety risk to themselves, but sometimes a safety risk from other members of the community. So how can we kind of make sure we're wrapping around that support as well? So, and then, like I said, there's emerging issues that we know we're going to be working on. We're going to be looking at our data, looking at our intelligence around the cannabis farms that everybody will have seen information about, and also the illegal vaping, you know, the too high strength, the use of vaping is within exploitation, and then e-bikes and scooters, and again, how they are being used by some of our kind of organised crimes as a way of exploiting our children and young people.
Yes, of course.
So that's, I'm going to pass over to Helen to a little bit more on the consultation.
Yeah, so as both Reece and Janice have mentioned, that there's been partner work gone into this, as well as providing data, assessing that data to combine it together, but also conducting that participation survey as well with residents and other stakeholders. So this took the form of online paper surveys, but also some face-to-face community sessions took place as well. And we were really pleased to see over 3,600 responses to those participation surveys across the city and across our partners. And those results are shown on page 95 in your packs as well. So based on the data and those consultation responses will be used in the S&A and those key actions and objectives against each of those priorities to develop that plan that is also in your packs a little bit further, including and identifying, as Reece has already mentioned, resolving data gaps and knowledge gaps that we've assessed through this work as well. So we'll do that as part of the Safer Newport Community Safety Plan that's on page 129 of your packs, and in line with the Serious Violence Duty Strategy, which is next on the agenda. So following any recommendations and observations from this committee, it is our intention that this will go through Cabinet and Council in May.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll start this time, if that's okay. Lovely. I was really glad to see one of my points on the drafting was getting it in as many languages as possible, which I'm sure presented a bit of a challenge. And I was really glad to see it, but the uptake of responses wasn't great, you know, especially from some of our more diverse communities in maybe the Maidy and Peel area, and you know, where we have a concentration of, you know, we've had one Czechia response, or Russia, Ukraine, 9 from Ukraine, 6 from Russia. Do we have any idea why it was so limited that, you know, you made it available in 15 languages, which is amazing. Do we know, you know, when you went out to the communities, did you access different groups, perhaps in our Muslim communities, or, you know, in our Turkish, whatever? How did that pan out? And do we have any reason why so few it was accessed in so few languages that you know of? And it's okay if you don't, because this is an ongoing thing.
I think in terms of the community languages, it went out through community connectors as well, that work officers working in the council put it out to community groups as well. I think it's just, I think sometimes that faceless response is difficult, but In terms of why, I don't know is the answer. It was made available, and that, you know, that was a key part of it.
And I did see it. I had something sent to me from another group. Yeah,
Yeah.
So I know that it was going around.
And unfortunately, that uptake's slightly out of our control once it crosses that line. In terms of community face-to-face stuff, we ran a face-to-face session up at the Sanctuary Project in the Gap Centre.
Oh, brilliant.
To ensure that, because literacy might be an issue as well for some. So
Especially
again,
as they deal with asylum seekers, you know,
yeah,
new to the country. Refugees.
yeah, and that's reflected in more kind of qualitative data in this pack.
Okay.
But that was a really informative session in terms of their experience of the city.
Yeah.
And actually, overwhelmingly, they all said they felt safe in Newport.
Yeah, which I think is wonderful. I think
Yeah.
I think that was really great. And yeah, that's wonderful. Okay. And one more thing, which you might not be able to answer. I noticed that last year there was a slight drop in housing register applications received. Do you think now we're going to see all the other figures balance out, and then a couple of years down the line, obviously that would pay off in, you know, people feel safer, it cuts down on ASB and things like that, isn't it? We might not be able to, that might just be more of an observation.
It's definitely regular housing teams on, and I think, you know, going back to the face-to-face sessions, a lot of that was around people feeling safe because their housing was safe.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, that how can we make sure that and we do work really closely with housing and communities team, but just making sure that that is really strong, you know, and how we work moving forward. Because, you know, if you feel secure in your housing, you're more likely to feel secure in your environment, in your communities, you're more likely to pride in your communities, and you know, all of those things. So yeah, really, really close links. I haven't got an answer necessarily, but it's just about how we just make sure that it becomes. I think there is a danger sometimes with a strategic needs assessment plan, that we, you know, Safe and Newport is kind of really strong on. It's making sure that it stays partnerships and it stays across all services, rather than it being seen as, you know, something that sits in Lisa's area. Doesn't it, you know, within the local authority?
Yes, for everyone.
Yeah, it's continuing that partnership and building that.
That's great, thank you. Right, I'll go round as I always do. Councillor Druitt, no?
No questions.
Councillor Jones? Right, oh, my order. Councillor Davis? Councillor Davis? We'll come back to Councillor Davis. Oh, there she is.
Yeah, no questions for me at the moment, just that it was a really brilliant report, and thank you for doing it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. Again, yeah, a great report, and this is a challenge, massively challenging area, because ASB, as we know, is on the rise, etc., etc. I think for us as residents, this process, like I say, we had a meeting in the week and we discussed obtaining a PSPO, a public space protection order. Yeah.
Context,
So these are the things that reports like this will keep us informed of, and how we go about securing one. So I think there's been good work around that. Engagement is crucial. So yeah, cheers.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Screen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And can I commend the report? I think it's very accessible. You know, I found it quite easy to go through and get the information. You know, it wasn't overdone, as with some reports. So congratulations on that. I thought that was really, really good layout, the way it was presented. Yeah, the one thing I picked up on there was the population in Newport, which is interesting, actually, because I didn't realise that 70% of Newport is rural, which is a surprise to me. I don't know why, but it was. And 30% of the rest of Newport contains the bulk of the population. Now, you could be a bit cynical, but I'm not cynical, and say, well, you look at that, and obviously most of your resources are going to be devoted to that 30%, you know, which is quite right. You know, that's where the bulk of the population lies. But, you know, there are other 70% rural areas. You know, there are, you know, some serious issues in rural areas, you know, and I'm just wondering how people in those rural areas, how safe they feel, you know, in their communities, you know. So I just really asking about, are rural areas forgotten? I'm sure they're not, but I'm just asking that question. And what can be done to, address perhaps safety concerns in those areas? Thank you.
I'll hand over to Janet and Helen on this. But just a reminder that was a particular requirement the committee asked us about in the previous meeting, and I know from, I think one of the interesting things about the community safety partnership side of it is that it currently has got some set work streams. Actually, quite a lot of the conversation about emerging themes and priorities and things happening and how we address those things. So I think, rural crime is one of those things because it comes up really regularly, and you're quite right to point out the challenges for people living in the 70% of people which is rural are different challenges to those people living in the urban centre of the city. But I'll hand over to Janice and carry on.
Yeah, I'm quickly flicking through. I know we did ask people which area they lived in when we did the consultation. I don't think it's in the papers, but I can provide that information for you as to, which wards people live in.
Yeah, you mentioned on page 96 that there's a full data pack. Just because I love a good stat, I'd love to see that.
That data pack's all broken down by ward, so the responses and even some of the rates and some of the wider crime graphs are broken down by ward. So if you want that and want to request that,
Councillor Screen, would you like a copy of that? I think we'll all.
Yes, I would actually, indeed, yeah. I mean, I just thinking, well, people retire to the countryside or whatever, and they think, this is the good life, nice and quiet. You've got the cows, you've got the birds, and all the rest of it, and the sheep, all cuddly things, But people don't realise, that, there's some nefarious things happening, in that countryside because you're isolated. If you like, and perhaps away from people. So it's just, just asking really, that these areas are not forgotten in a sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Screen. Councillor Hussain?
Yep, that's fine.
Thank you, Chair. My question was actually similar to yours about the participation from diverse communities and how you actually obviously there was a problem there, and there's so many factors that could be the reason for that. Is there anything maybe we could do to change that for the future? Or I mean, you've translated it into many languages. You've said you've approached a lot of community groups, but still the participation was low from the diverse community.
Before you say that, I would add to that as well. It'd be interesting. I'd imagine that some of the people that produced it on the bus used it in English and didn't pick it up in another language as well.
And that's in the data pack as well. We do ask about that. So that'll be in the data pack as well.
Sorry, Ms. Cohen.
Yeah, so I suppose there's a lot of data that sits behind what you've got here as well. I think, as part of our development needs, and this isn't just about community safety, this is just about engagement, full stop. If you look at that broader participation strategy for the local authority, it is about how do you better enable people in those communities to actually talk to you about their views. So if I give you an example, so the Pill master planning work that has gone on, which was part funded by Welsh Government, as part of that work, we engaged through the partnership. So it is linked to community, but sits outside of this, and particularly linked to your question, Councillor, saying, because there's things we can learn from that. So as part of that work, a social enterprise called Mela were engaged to undertake community engagement, and so we've got several thousand responses from the community of Pill on that specific piece of work. And it was incredibly labour intensive, but also there's a raft of really good intelligence that will drive part of the community safety partnership. Because I think I think what we also need to remember, we have a data set and we'll come up with some broad priorities across the city, but there will also be place-based approaches within that. So it's, and we talked about this in our development day when we were going through it. So, you know, there will be more work done in individual areas, because it's inconceivable to me that you will, for instance, not have a specific piece of work that we've got at the moment, which is in the city centre.
Yeah.
Yeah. And around sort of those particular hotspots. Now, Councillor Whitehead came on, there are particular issues in Venice at the moment. You know, police are making changes to the way they operate. We're working through contextual safeguarding approach to the work there as well. So generally, there's that responsiveness. But I think there's a lot of stuff Councillor is saying that we've done through that work we did through the master planning stuff we went through, that we can adapt for some of this going forward within the resources that we've got. Because obviously there was a chunk of money from Welsh Government to do that in the first place. So, you know, and I would say the entirety of the partnership team that supports community safety is sat at the table. So it's not like we've got a raft of people who are able to do it. But it's you know, that point is not lost on us.
We can ever help you. I'm
Thank
sorry to
you.
speak for all. We can ever help you.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
important for me. With the participation strategy and that kind of, you know, and it's one of the streams for the data workplace as well, is actually this is the consultation that we did. So it is about kind of helping everybody else help us, you know, around this room as ward members is crucial. And going back to Councillor Screen's point about, you know, when we go out to ward meetings and have those conversations as well. But also in relation to, we know, for example, that Gwent Police do a lot of engagement with different communities across Newport. So how can we have access to some of that information? And, you know, and where those relationships have been built and have been worked by, you know, being kind of successful with our partners, how can we learn from that and piggyback on it in some ways, or have access to that information that's relevant to all of us across Newport, rather than it just staying within Gwent Police as an example, or Newport City Council as another example. It is about that sharing of information, and also that helps with our kind of consultation fatigue as well. If we're always going out to the same kind of community groups from, you know, 6 different agencies, people can get a bit fed up of answering. Absolutely. So how can we just be a bit smarter, I think is going to be important moving forward.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Chair, I'm just going to have to leave now because it's about 7-8 minutes for me to break my fast. So
no worries.
Yeah, so apologies, I'm have to leave. Thank you. And it was a very well presented report. Obviously, I should have said that in the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Councillor Pitt, have you got any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if you worked alongside the housing associations in trying to obtain information and feedback. I would assume that a large number of issues were probably related to a number of the properties that they manage within the Newport area. I was wondering what kind of involvement they had with regards to this this report, if any. I didn't see anything mentioned in the report about the housing associations.
Do you want to take that? Because I know you did a lot of partner work with the.
Yeah, I think the partner work was there. The questions were asked for contributions to data. Nothing specific came back in from the RSLs that was specifically pulled out of this. However, that partnership is very much established but needs to be built on properly moving forward. And they do form part of our kind of subgroup element as well. So we get a lot of information and working with them, but nothing that was specifically drawn out for this SNA.
Following on from that, Helen, are the housing associations disciplinary procedures ever looked into, especially in terms of antisocial behaviour? Because, and again, I did declare an interest at the start that my wife is an antisocial behaviour reduction officer in Torvine, and so we speak about a number of issues that she experiences within Torvine. And my background in the fire service is we do come across problem individuals on a regular basis. were the procedures of the housing associations looked into, and how they deal with antisocial behaviour on the estates that they manage, and also how they deal with problem customers of theirs? Because from my experience, a lot of these people are passed from kind of one area to the next, and their behaviour continues. And the police are very limited to what they can do, and are very reliant on the housing associations to kind of carry out the disciplinary process.
Thank you, Councillor Pym. I think we still take that one.
I will, because this is primarily the sort of data and analytics part of it. But I would just say, following through to the community safety plan, the partnership and the subgroups, that is the sort of thing that we deal with on a more tactical basis. So we'll have a particular issue in a particular place, and partners will get together to talk about the particular solutions around that. And that might involve individual households or families or individuals even. Right, so we use our powers under the Crime and Disorder Act in order to facilitate that. That doesn't just relate to RSLs, that relates to any partners and any particular issues that we've got. So it won't necessarily appear in this. It'll be broadly in there, potentially antisocial behaviour, but on a tactical level, what we will do is it's usually through a section 115, which is the mechanism within the Crime and Disorder Act, actually get together and talk about solutions around that particular issue.
Okay.
And I think that's and as we bring the community safety plan back through committee and report on it, that's a really important thing for you to understand. There's a plan, but actually the statutory responsibility is about how we work together in order to reduce crime and disorder in the area. Absolutely. And that very much comes under a granular level. Something will happen somewhere, and we will need to respond as a partnership to that thing.
Thank you very much. That makes perfect sense. Thank you, Councillor Pym.
Cheers.
Thank you. I think that's it.
How does the data you've collected feed into the community well-being profiles that are in existence? But 2021, I think, was the last one published.
Yeah, so the main responsibility, obviously, of that has gone through the wellbeing needs assessment, wellbeing plan in the Gwent PSB, but we are working now with our partners as part of the new plan to make sure that we are looking to update those. But the data group that we talked about and how we can work that is very much working with our intelligence hub, our Newport intelligence hub colleagues, to develop something that actually we can all use as partners, and we can all make sure that we're keeping up to date and can access it and really see the true picture, rather than having to do a big exercise every year. Just making sure that stays live. So we are working with our partners there to be able to be smarter on those wellbeing assessments.
Thank you very much. I'll just reiterate what other members have said. The report was brilliant, super interesting, and thank you for your hard work on engaging as many people as possible. That's no mean feat, especially when so much, honestly. It was great, and especially
other things as well.
Yeah. Okay. And I especially loved the engagement with the youth council as well. I thought that was brilliant. Thank you so much. So we move on now to yes, comments and recommendations for this report before we move on to the next one.
Okay.
Yeah.
General comments I've got. We commended the report, found it really accessible, and it was presented really well. The request for the data pack by the wards, and your comment, Chair, that you'd like to see it translated to as many languages as possible, which was fed back for the previous meeting. Is there any other comments, recommendations the committee would like to make in regards to this report?
I'm happy with that. I recommend it goes forward. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's a good report. We asked for, did Neil say it? We asked for data for our individual.
Yes. So we'll get the data pack. That would be great. Oh, it's the screen. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to see that reference to rural areas put in there. In the sense of recognising that the safety, security of people living in rural areas, is as important as in other areas, or something along those lines, that they're not forgotten. Thank you, Chair.
Toward his modulars.
Thank you. Right, let's move on to item number 6, the serious violence duty, like strategic needs assessment and strategy. Reece, you again?
Again, I'll start off and then hand over to colleagues. So serious violence duty came into effect 31st January 2023. That puts a requirement on specified authorities. Local authorities are one of the specified authorities, but there's a list in the report of the others, to work together to prevent and reduce serious violence in the area. And obviously that very much following the approach we've just talked about. That involves an assessment and then a strategy for doing that, and very much linked into the strategic needs assessment for community safety and the community safety plan that we'll have as well. Right? So I just think they might look a bit separate at the moment because we're different bits of legislation, but actually the approach will be joined up on a local basis. So this is the first serious violence strategic needs assessment that we've had to undertake, and has been undertaken collaboratively across Gwent. So Sam is here primarily to talk about the collaboration about undertaking the needs assessment. The strategy then we'll hand back over to Janice and Helen, because actually the strategy for Newport is Newport strategy. So Sam might have a view on some of those things, but very much that's a nice thing. So I'll hand over to the team and we'll.
Yeah, so I guess Lisa's already given a bit of an introduction as to what the duty is, and it's pretty much following along the model of the counter-terrorism duty, in that it's quite simple at its heart, trying to prevent and reduce serious violence. And as Lisa's already highlighted, there's a number of specified authorities who are bound by that duty, that requirement to reduce and prevent serious violence, and local authorities, police, usual community safety partners are those. And there are some nuances with the duty, and the reason why I'm here is because under the legislation, the police and crime commissioners have been given a convening role to bring partners together to work through the development of the duty and how that is applied across their area, and obviously then locally here in Newport, how that works through here. So there's a number of things that we have to do. One is develop that needs assessment, as Reece already alluded to. That needs assessment then flows into that wider community safety needs assessment, but it also goes broader than that because it's down to each individual agency and other partnerships that are affected by the duty, such as the Violence Against Women and Girls, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Board, and other partnerships that exist. There's also a delivery plan that comes on the back of that, and a bit of funding, a small amount of funding from the Home Office that is sort of helping each area to work through this problem. So in terms of how the duty unfolded, each of the areas has to develop a definition as to what serious violence means for them. And again, as Reece highlighted, we worked in collaboration with all the partners across Gwent to work through what that definition looks like, and to identify what those key violent crime types are and violent crime incidents are that we want to try and resolve and focus on. Very much following a model that's been tested across England and Wales of violence reduction units, where you have a lot of violent crime activity that we want to try and focus on, and over time, as that partnership matures, some of that will potentially reduce. I won't go through all of the I know it's in your pack, but I won't go through all of the areas that partners agreed that they wanted to focus on. But because of that areas of focus, we then put all of the data behind that to try and understand what that problem looks like, both across Gwent and in each area. I won't go into any detail as to what the needs assessment says specifically for Newport, but there's a lot in there, and a number of those issues are probably not that surprising. So things like more violence happening at weekends, more violence happening in the city centre, that sort of thing. But there are some interesting nuances, particularly around who the key victims are, who the key offenders are, and some of those crime types that I think are interesting specifically for Newport. So on the back of that, obviously, as Reece has highlighted, a strategy was developed. Our public health partners were involved in supporting that, and therefore the sort of how that then gets worked through here in Newport is over to the CSP. and to work through with that issue, and to integrate, as has been highlighted, into that wider strategy, that wider needs assessment process that we've just been talking through. So that's
It's a lot of thanks for
as I mentioned, there is a small amount of money that comes through from the Home Office, and again, part of the reason why I'm here as representative of the Police and Crime Commission is that our role is to sort of coordinate, facilitate the spending of that money, monitoring the performance of both the funding and also the implementation of those strategies locally and across Gwent, and then obviously reporting some of that back to the Home Office as well, as we've got some key metrics and indicators that have to be reported back nationally. I'll stop there. Happy to take any questions in terms of how we've worked it through, but just highlight in terms of over the past year since the 31st of January, one of the things that we've been doing is coordinating meetings with all of the partners to try and work through this problem, reduce duplication, and I think we've had some real benefits in terms of sharing data, sharing information, and trying to get that in a consistent way so that the product hopefully is fit for purpose for Newport and all the other areas as well.
Thank you so much. Alice and Helen, did you want to add to that in terms of the Newport context?
Yeah, I think if you look at the actions within the strategy and the priorities, you can see how they, kind of are informed by and inform our local community safety plans. I think that was something that we talked about when we came in November, was the importance of this work kind of supporting local and feeding into regional rather than it being a when all the other areas about they align. So, the data again strong is really strong, and actually that regional working enables us to do is to have that kind of wider view of, if you think about Nairn and Gwent Police, those South Wales Fire and Rescue Service, those ones that have got the regional kind of focus and how we can make sure that that's effective. I'm not going to say too much because it's Helen's little baby, really. I think, it's probably, as you can see from the graphs, and we talked about this in November as well, we are looking at, and I know that Carl Williams sent committee members some information about, this is kind of looking at us in relation to Gwent, whereas obviously, as a city, we have some different issues.
Absolutely.
So it's about how we use that regional information, but very much, kind of translate it and analyse it into a local response. The funding is always really good, using a theory of change model. So looking at what do we actually want to achieve, and then working backwards as to how we've been able to get that. So again, working with public health around that theory of change model is adding to our local understanding and our local intelligence. So that's, so yeah, I guess what I'm saying is it is really, it's brilliant to work regionally, but we're not losing that local focus, and making sure that we're staying kind of within the context of helping our residents and visitors and people who work in and around it. Thanks.
So yeah, I guess just in terms of a practical perspective of how we're going to implement and embed it, as Sam said, how important that is. It's about, we identified it in a workshop we had as a CSP, that actually when we're looking at those three priorities that have come out of our Newport SNA, and we're looking at things like antisocial behaviour, for example, we know that escalation into serious violence is very likely, or there's a chance of that happening. So with that escalation, we need to consider that in terms of antisocial behaviour as well. In terms of serious organised crime, we know that serious violence is key and hand in hand with serious organised crime as a mechanism for control. But also then in terms of vulnerable groups, we know that they are at risk of serious violence being perpetrated against them. So for us, when we look at it in reality and how it's going to be worked out, it's the golden thread throughout those three priorities, that it won't be lost, it won't be segregated either, but it will be very much form part of our thinking on a continuum basis through all of those subgroups and work that we'll put in place.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Pym in a moment. I just want to check one thing with the data. So on page 179 of the pack, where we've got the Newport breakdown of serious violence. So we've got stalking and harassment, homicide, and we see the Newport and then the Gwent figures. When we get to weapon-related crime and rape and sexual offences, the figures are the same for Newport and for Gwent. And I'm really sorry that I've noticed that, and I might be just misinterpreting the data. I'm really sorry. I just wondered whether that just needs to tweak.
Just, yeah, we can.
You can see what I mean, whether the Newport figures have been replicated. I think it happens with the other local authorities as well. Sorry, it just makes it difficult to look at it, you know, flat numbers to see its proportion. Sorry. Okay, I'll stop saying sorry. Because I didn't do it. Councillor Pym.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a few things that I noticed within the report, and I think that Helen then mentioned it, where the one thing that seems to underpin most of these violent crimes would be county line drug dealing, and we know in Newport that we no different from any other city of a similar size to us, that we've got big problems with drug dealing and county lines within Newport. So that was not really mentioned much in the report, but you've kind of explained the reasons why just before I asked that. Coming onto the stats, you've got knife and gun crime stats. So within those statistics, as we know, drug dealing is an horrendous business and it's incredibly violent. From what I can gather, more and more drug dealers are using alternative bladed weapons to attack rival drug dealers and other crime members. Have those alternative bladed instruments been included in the knife and the gun crime? So you've got even like knitting needles, for example, is one that's used as a means of attacking people. Also improvised weapons that are made up, so it could be koshes or bats. Is the knife and the gun crime stat specifically knife and guns, or is it all forms of weaponry that's used?
I'll give part of an answer. It will be bladed weapons. Within that, I would assume. It would be useful to have a police colleague who would actually tell us how they record those crimes. So we're probably.
Can we get further information on that?
Yeah,
sorry, Sam knows the answer.
Oh, thank you, Sam.
Yeah, it contains in that. It's all weapons. So wherever a weapon has been used, whether that's a knife, a gun, or rope, whatever it might be, those are considered. In those stats.
So that's weapon related to crime. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. And then the other thing that I noticed has been a reduction in hospital attendances. Well, I'm just wondering, as you know, with a number of these people involved in these criminal attacks on each other, one of the worst places they could go, even though that they desperately need medical treatment, is the hospital, because not only could they be bump into the people that they've been fighting with, but also the police could be on hand to arrest them, or there'll be staff there wanting to know the reasons as to why they've been injured in the way that they have. Has this been factored in, that there'll be a reluctance from people who have been involved in organised crime to go to hospitals in relation to the reduction in hospital attendances?
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily been factored into the data, because the data is the data. Obviously, in terms of the next steps as to what I would say just more generally around the SNA is obviously this is the first one, and there is a requirement under the duty to review this every year. And one of the things that we're undertaking over the course of the next year is to work with everybody, including obviously here in Newport and other partners, is to determine what are the things that we want to explore and dive deeper into around the data that we've got so far. Because it's still in pretty much in its infancy around what it looks like and how deep that information goes. In relation to the hospital admissions, that's obviously just come from the health board and tells us that current picture. It doesn't tell us why it's gone down. It doesn't tell us what the sort of the nuances are in relation to that information. At this stage, our health colleague partners are working on that, and they're developing some really interesting information that's starting to come out.
I guess you don't know what you don't know as well. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Pym?
No, that was it. Cheers. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. I will go back round to everyone in the usual order. Councillor Whitehead, I will come to you momentarily.
Sorry,
Councillor Gray.
Does this report stand by itself, or is there the intention of using this data to feed into the community profiles that I mentioned earlier?
So hand over in a minute. From my perspective, it does both. So in terms of, there's a couple of things it needs to tick. So one is the Home Office requirement to produce those relevant documents, and that's what this document does as a standalone. But it's very much, its entire purpose is about then feeding into those local plans, that local planning, and being used by local partnerships, regional partnerships, and others in the operationalised basically. Thank you.
Mr. Jones.
No, the question I have was just been answered actually. How it feeds into the local police forces, how they take action upon the information that they get, and how updated it is, really how relevant it's going to be when they receive it. So that's all. Thanks.
Councillor Davis.
Sorry, I was reading part of the report as well as
Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very brilliant report. Well done for that. I was horrified though to see that homicide in Newport over the last 5 years has increased 300%. I didn't think we were that bad. That makes it sound like I've always seen Newport as quite a small city compared to the likes of Cardiff, Birmingham, Manchester, and all those areas. So to see that, I was quite horrified.
I would say that's a number of 3 people. Yeah, it's gone from 0 to 3. So yeah, it's a small number. Obviously, yeah.
Don't look at percentages.
Still significant, but
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Perhaps it should have been done in a different way, because I think anybody else reading the report will get the same feeling that I did. So maybe rather than have it as a 300%, make it a little bit smaller, so it's easier for other people to understand as well.
Thank you, Councillor David.
Thank you.
You know that. Would that be all right, Neil? Thank you. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. Only a couple of observations. I mean, to touch on what people have already said, really, a ward-by-ward profile numbers-wise would be interesting, as Councillor Druitt alluded to. That would be quite interesting. And the other thing is, touching on what Matthew said, the whole thing is an intimidating area. I think this is something like this is needed. Let's get that out there. But and so by virtue of it being an intimidating, spectrum, engagement with residents is going to be interesting. How we do that, anonymity and things like that, avenues of engaging and reporting. And do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Whitehead.
Sorry, Jim. It just came in.
Absolutely.
I think this is, we have to remember this is the start as well. As Sam said, this is the first iteration. This will be adapted and refined. It was interesting talking to a colleague from another local authority outside of Gwent, who should remain nameless, but they've even started doing this strategic needs assessment yet, right? So I think we're pretty how to get away with that. I don't know so, but I think it is the first one of these. It's important that we do it, not just because it's a statutory responsibility, but also because actually we need to understand this information better so we can adapt differently. And we will report through this committee regularly as well on once we've got the actions in place and our interventions, we will report through to say this is the difference that it's making. My caveat with that, and I'll go back to the previous comment, some of the data, because it's looking at serious violence, some of the data, we are looking at very small numbers. And small fluctuations can have big percentage changes within it. And, and actually you can do all the right things and might not necessarily affect those numbers because we are looking at very small numbers and things happen. So, I think there's some stuff within that. For us to not lose sight of.
Absolutely. Yeah, Sam just wanted to.
Yeah, I got one more point. That's all.
Yeah, it was just on that point, really. It's just in terms of those small numbers, and there are certain things within the the legislation that we have to focus on, and we have to report on, homicide being one of those. So again, it makes sense that those numbers are low. But going back to Councillor Whitehead's point around local engagement, that's very much one of the priorities within the strategy, is about local areas taking this information, engaging with their communities as part of the development of their local plans. And you know, as you've heard already today, that's already starting to feature and is already coming out from Newport's development.
It's the Whitehead.
Yeah, all it was, just again, it's just to say, like, unfortunately, the area what we're talking at present is just it's tragic, really, that it seems to be an horrible growth industry. Do you know, it seems to be on the up. As Matthew said, with the county lines, the ages are getting younger, the mules, as they call them. So yeah, this is the works that was always screaming out to be done. So we have to big up the people that are taking it forward, and hopefully we'll see some success. So well done, everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Screen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, can I commend you on the report? I think it was, again, very accessible, easy to use, very informative. So, you know, well done on that. Yeah, two things first. I'm very disappointed to see the increase in rape and other sexual offences, you know, offences against women and girls. It's very sad to see that rate increase. You know, I'm not sure what it tells us about the times we live in or whatever. Anyway, that's on the side. The main question, I think, is one that Councillor Hussain would probably ask. Looking at ethnic groups. Are particular groups being targeted, particularly in terms of hate crime, particularly given the current environment, you know, that we're living in, and equally, are other groups being perhaps unfairly targeted by law enforcement? You know, I mean, that's a big issue. I know you probably can't give us a breakdown of the ethnicity, probably legal or reason for it, but it'd be interesting to note whether that's been on the increase over the last 12 months or so. I mean, is there any way that information can be presented? Thank you.
I'll just add a bit that I was going to ask to Councillor Screen, so we don't have to come back to it. In terms of those rape and sexual offences, obviously the report's amazing, but you know, we've got this leap up to 489. Do we think that's more confidence, people coming forward and reporting, as opposed to there being more activity, for want of a better?
It is one of those things that we need to dig into, isn't it? And I know the committee had a report from the regional boundary leader prize last meeting, sorry, which used to be me. So I'm really conscious of how much work has gone on in Gwent and in Newport in increasing that work, both from, you know, kind of from the team, from local authorities, and from the police to raise that confidence and kind of ability for people to report. So I think it goes back to Reese's point as well, doesn't it? That, you know, unfortunately or fortunately, wherever it might be, sometimes the more work you do, actually doesn't give you the results.
No, but this is a good result.
Yeah,
it's a good result. As people coming forward, that is a good result, isn't it? So, yeah. But yes, there is definitely an element of that, and you'll see that from the strategy that you talked about in your last meeting, from the work that Welsh Government have done around promoting access to support. And more locally, what have we done? What has Gwent Police done? You know, to be able to think of that's it. It's more, but it's encouraging because it's not more. Just, Thank you. Sorry, and Councillor Screen's other question. Apologies about how for groups affected the community. Sorry, Councillor Screen, I completely butted in there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, it is. I mean, I think, you know, generally in society, we've seen an increase in hate crime. You know, a general trend, increasing trend in hate crime. And I just think it would add another dimension, perhaps, if we knew, you know, I mean, you know, most violent crime is against males, as you said in the report, between 16 and 24, you know, so, you know, we know that. So I'm just wondering whether that element, you know, that dimension is perhaps missing somewhere. And it might be useful to look at that, particularly as, you know, conditions in society, you know, are changing. you know, because of various events around the world and so on. You know, is that possible to include that next time?
And community safety side of it as opposed to the serious violence.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry.
I think that someone's going to disagree with me. Well, it depends whether it's in the serious violence report. Depends what it is. Right, but I think that point about what's the intelligence about the impacts of some of this stuff on different parts of the community, I think it's a worthwhile point raising. I think more broadly, it's probably more related to community safety, so we'll take that back as part of that as well. And also, which I know is not for the work program when he goes up to the next meeting, so we talked about what's going to be on the program. So at some point in the summer, I think, you know, we'll be coming, well, I'll be coming back with Jane Harvey to talk about the counter-terrorism side of it.
Oh,
and I think some of those points come to the screen. We'll pick up there about the impacts on bits of community, and that will be a.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Councillor Drake, you have a comment?
Just a clarification really. On page 180, it's the top sentence, and it's the phrase community safety domain. So I'm not quite sure what that means.
It's again, colleagues who are close to this can see. So within the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation, there are a series of domains. One of them is one or number of community safety related. So it ranks those lower super output areas by community safety. Yeah, have I interpreted that a bit right? Yeah. Okay. So the domain is right. So it might be worth us putting what the domains are in this under as well, just for clarity. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, okay. I think, sorry, bless me. Okay, comments, recommendations? Hey, Neil, keep it away.
That's a comment share about the data on page 17 on the pack about the weapon related crime and sexual violence, justifications, or
yes,
corrected. Again, can you phrase the report? Councillor Davis's comment about is there a different way you can present the figures rather than a percentage?
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Again, the Councillor Screen's comment about the report being accessible and informative, but some gave information and was comment about the breakdown of the ethnicity of particular groups being targeted in hate crime. I think she said that was going to be brought up in the summer meeting.
We'll not all of it. Some of it might relate to serious violence, because it depends if it's serious violence or not within that category. We can pick it up within the strategic needs assessment for community centres broadly. I will cover it up when we do the counter-terrorism.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
It goes to a different committee, it goes to OSMC, but we're also working on that in relation to the strategic equalities plan, which is going to cabinet and council now again. So you know those things about how do different people in our communities, different groups feel about their safety, etc. So it's in lots of different things. So we can just make sure that we're keeping members up to date. Thank you on the work that we're doing. And some of the work you've specifically done working with our strategic equalities lead is about engaging with those communities that might be more at risk of hate crime and so the LGBTQ community plus the BTS and things like that. Yeah. So yeah, and really trying to kind of understand that difference. So
thank you.
Apart from those website, was there any other comments, recommendations the committee would like to include?
Anyone? All good. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your time and being here so late. And honestly, thanks for all your hard work. It's brilliant. Absolutely. Yeah, just pass it.
Not the best, is it? The report, the details of what the report is about. It's not the best, but it's well presented. Well presented.
This, and now we know what we're dealing with, which is obviously.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your hard work. Thank you. Thank you. We do the forward program next, so it's the Councillor Jones in 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that the next one? It is.
So the next
Oh no, scrutiny advice report, sorry, just look at
So the next meeting we have is on the 24th of April. That would be the adoption and fostering process. So we'll be given an update from Scrutiny.
Good night, Sam.
Good night. The 24th of April is our next meeting.
So that's adoption and fostering services and the Wing Savers partnership. So this is the first time that Wing Savers will be discussed in the committee.
Oh, brilliant.
So it'll be a general presentation of the business goal, and then we'll give feedback on which one we'd like to form future reports as well.
Okay.
Who's coming? We see this?
That will, I imagine that would be the director, that would be the head of the environment and public protection as well. As soon as I get more information on who else will be invited, I can mention. That will be the last meeting of this current meeting cycle. We'll be able to present the draft annual forward programme as well. So we've met up with head service and strategic directors to discuss all the items that are required to come to committee and what items they would like to bring to committee. But of course, if there's any particular items that committee would like to add, of course, this is your forward work programme, is free to form as you wish. So we've got an opportunity then to see what you'd like to add on. And then just the action sheet, Chair, we've all up to date with the actions. So thank you. So we've sent all the information from Gwen Police about the violence against women. Information requested, and Amy Thomas sent us the additional information about the SEND campaign. Yes, so we're all up to date on that, Chair.
Brilliant. Well done, team. Thank you very much. Right, one last item, so we passed. Go back to item 3, everyone that's previous meeting. Alan, could you pop your microphone up so I don't have to hear myself? Thank you. Right, does anyone, if we just go to the minutes, so it's on your agenda pack, page 3, anything? Page 4, anything? Page 5, page 6, page 7. Do we have a proposer?
Yes.
Do we have a seconder? Does anyone wish to second the minutes of the last meeting? It's the screen. It's the Davis.
Yeah, I'll
second it.
Yeah.
Very much. And that is us for the evening. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all your hard work. And see you on April the 24th. Yes.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank
Okay.
you.